I'm really delighted to welcome Jay Pocknell and Peter Bosher to the stage to talk about their fantastic new initiative, Sound Without Sight. So this is another member of the Creative United family who Mary Alice introduced us to, and they've got some really important ideas they'd like to share with you. So yeah, without further ado, I'll hand over to Peter. Thanks, Peter.
So thank you so much to Alex and James and Jacob for inviting us and for organising this amazing event. It's so far so good, so I'm sure the rest of it's going to be great too. I'm going to take about 5 minutes to give you the context of Sound Without Sight, which is what we're talking about, tell you how we got to where we are, and then Jay will give you a picture of where we're going. So this is Jay Pocknell. I'll explain more about who he is and what we're doing. I'm Peter. I'm totally blind from a baby. I don't always make a point about that, but today it does seem relevant, and I'm kind of a sort of a case study. Even as a child, I loved recording. I would record plays and music shows with my friends. I wasn't the actor or the presenter, I just loved recording. Birds, soundscapes, bands, anything that moved, basically.
How you doing? All right.
And I just knew, even then, that I wanted to be a sound engineer. But people told me that being blind, I couldn't study electronics or electrical engineering or run around making tea in recording studios. And I believed them. So I ended up studying French and philosophy. And I then spent all my time recording music. We were using an old data storage 16 track, which caught fire at one point, and doing stuff for Radio Oxford. I was using razor blades to cut the tape and blue tack to mark edit points. I think I must be in the beyond category that James was talking about. Then talking computers came along, and I discovered sequencers, audio editors, and what eventually became DAWs. But the point of telling you all of this is that it was really hard to find out how to do this stuff. There was no internet, just tape magazines and the odd lucky hookup. Actually, it's still hard to find, even with the internet. And that's a key driver for our project, Sound Without Sight. Fast forward to the 2000s, and I went back to college to study sound recording on the Tom Meister course at Surrey University. And on that course, some of the equipment was semi-accessible, with lots of workarounds, and still even using blue tack to mark places on the screen for on-screen mixing desks. I do love blue tack. My work since then has always been a combination of assistive tech and actual recording. So I worked in the studio at Royal Academy of Music, did lots of freelance stuff, and my best ever working time was a studio engineer with BBC Radio Drama, where happily for me, I was forced to learn Pro Tools. So sorry, man. I now have regular editing work with BBC Radio, and I see that as a really small success in the Bob Dylan sense of the success. Bob Dylan says if you wake up each day and do something you want to do, then you can count that as a success. But it's taken me 20 or 30 years. Along the way, I've trained other blind people in how to use audio software and music editors like Sibelius and the Dancing Dots solutions. Now, here's the dilemma: performance without barriers, bridging the gap, sound without sight. There are barriers, there are problems. I wish I weren't here. I wish this day didn't have to exist. But there are two ways to approach problems or barriers. One is to whine about how awful everything is, and the other is to acknowledge that there is a problem and trying to find solutions. Should we, as blind people, devote our time and energy to finding access solutions and trying to support other blind people, or should we just get on with it? I guess I've tried to combine both, and lots of the people here and lots of the people taking part in this are combining both. I'll come back to that in a minute. In 2014 or so, after the Visually Impaired Musicians Lives Conference, which some of you might remember, it was quite I know Joe is here who was there, and lots of other people may have been there. It was quite a successful international conference. We ran a pilot which led to the setting up of the VIB Forum of Blind Musicians and Sound Engineers. And the aim of that was to be a self-help network, a bit similar to TAVIP, which is the Technology Association of Visually Impaired People. And this came into its own during the pandemic with some good webinars, some led by people here today, including Scott, Andre, and others, and John. The Zoom phenomenon also made it easier to assemble a steering group, which we called Music and Sound with Accessibility. So initially, our group was called Music and Sound with Accessibility. Not a very catchy title, but it does say what it does. That was made up of some people from the blindness sector, ex-RNIB people, including Sally Zimmerman, who will have helped many of the people here. She used to run the music advisory service there. But also people from academia, people from the music industry. We came up with a good, clear project covering 3 areas: audio production, music notation, and performance. And Jay will tell you more, but the point is that we needed a project manager, somebody who would wake up each day and do the work. And this is where, as Quincy Jones put it, God walked in the room. And a tutor from that Tom Meister course, which Jay had also done, put Jay in touch. Jay is visually impaired. He has experience in the music industry. Old Jay, London Grammar, ring any bells? And he was working on a project called Sound Without Sight. And that project had so much in common with ours that we could have filed for industrial espionage. But instead, we asked Jay to become the project manager. And now, thanks to some support from TAVIP, the organisation I mentioned, and also funding from the Elizabeth Eagle Bot Fund, which is run by RNIB, who, by the way, partly thanks to our previous work, have now snapped up Jay for related work. So he's part-time with RNIB as Music Support Officer. And that work is really complementary to Sound Without Sight. So it's all working out really well. Jay is in a fantastic position to take the work forward. The solutions, how you can actually use Pro Tools, Logic, Reaper, and so on, can seem like rocket science. And Scott, Chi Kim, Andre Louis, other people here are the rocket scientists. They're pioneers. So what Scott and others have done for Reaper, Slough Hallerton, Chi Kim, and others have done for Pro Tools, Andre and others for Logic, and I'd really like to pay tribute to these people and the hours and days that they've put into campaigning, training materials, and so on. We wouldn't be where we are without those people. I really, really want to say a huge thank you to them. We want to bring all of this together to form a knowledge hub and a community and fill in the gaps for other scenarios, so some of the more obscure things, some of the wider areas that we've talked about, with everyone contributing. So we and teachers and educators and family can tell children and young people, yes, you can be a studio engineer, you can be a producer, you can be a performing musician. So here is Jay to tell you more.
Well, I mean, thank you so much, Peter. That was a pretty mad intro that's covered quite a lot of this, actually. So we'll kind of skip through this a little bit and, just keep stuff moving. I've got to say, I feel a little bit like Britney Spears with this little kind of side mic going on. I'm not used to this, and also hearing my own voice. It's very strange. So I think it's worth probably doing a little bit about me, just so you're aware of why it's me stood here rather than someone else. So like Peter, I've always been very into music and recording and everything, and doing it for myself. I was very aware at a young age that it was possible and I could do it, and I started doing it as quickly as I could in the local community, meeting, bands, artists, open mic nights and festivals, and kind of getting them round to record, and I guess getting into the world of production, which was amazing. I guess another two things about me are that I'm partially sighted and I'm very stubborn. I knew that by hook or by crook I would end up working in the sphere of the music industry in some way, and I really wanted to make that happen, so I did. I kind of, I don't know, forced it to fit a little bit, I guess, and ended up in that position of doing the kind of London commercial recording studio thing quite successfully. Worked on some good stuff, which is great, but I did find once I got there that there were certain barriers that made it slightly more difficult than I was expecting, maybe, because I think growing up, being partially sighted, you almost have to choose which group you sit with. Like, are you sighted or are you blind? People find it quite difficult to understand the kind of crossover and, that it is a complete spectrum. And I think finding the barriers later on made me realize that there is some real representation work that needs to be done, in that there's really no shame in accepting that partial sight, it does lead to barriers. So I think rather than getting, I don't know, feeling forlorn or down or whatever, I was aware that I was feeling something, and I think it was frustration of kind of working to get to the point of working in the industry and it being a little bit more difficult than I thought. So I guess the pandemic came around and the industry stuff calmed down for a little bit, which was a shame, but it also gave me the space to think about what a project could do to try and address some of those barriers. So that's how we got to where we are now. So I guess I started out as a kind of solo one-man band, really, just reaching out within the industry, like my networks, for anyone that was blind or partially sighted, or either they're working in the industry or they wanted to, but they felt like they couldn't for whatever reason. I just did some kind of casual, I don't know, it's not official research because it's not really supported in that way, but it was just conversations, really, just meeting people, some people from this room, actually, I reached out to, and we had great conversations. And I kind of collated all of that into a small set of common barriers, I think, which I don't want to kind of propagate too much, but I think it's important to acknowledge them, like Peter said, so that we can then find solutions, some of which will be suggested later on in this talk. So accessibility issues experienced quite early on were cited, like, going through school, some people going through mainstream schools and not being able to access the tools that were on offer. And I think that combined with this one later on, which is the lack of representation of blind and partially sighted people in mainstream music, kind of led people to believe that they couldn't do it, I guess, kind of like Peter was describing. And that's a shame, and those are things that can be changed, definitely. And there was another group of people who found like they had adequate access through school, whether that was with assistive tech or just the kind of having a regular meeting on special educational needs or whatever, if that was applicable. And that does kind of fall away once you become an adult and you have to access the industry for real. There is some support available for access to work, but often the people that you deal with, the assessors and stuff, don't necessarily have specialist knowledge in music or in sight impairment. So it's difficult. But again, if there's a way of providing common information and solutions, maybe we can go some way to making that a better situation, right? And unfortunately, things that were reported by people that I spoke to were, I guess, forms of discrimination that no one was really meaning. Like, no one sets out to discriminate, but quite a lot of kind of job descriptions in the music industry, or even as a freelancer as well, it's like, you must have a driving license, you must get in early and be the last one to leave at the end of the day, and it's not necessarily that inclusive a working style. And again, people reported that they believed that other people got positions above them because they were sighted, and that's a shame. So what's sound without sight, and how can we try and fix these things? So what we're going to start out with is an online platform to kind of support, promote, and connect blind and partially sighted musicians and audio engineers. And it's not setting out to reinvent the wheel. Obviously, we're aware that communities do already exist. There's some amazing WhatsApp groups and email groups that have been spoken about already today, but they're quite difficult to discover if you're accessing music for the first time and you're not part of these groups or anyone you know is already part of these groups. So if we can create a directory, a way into this world that kind of collates everything together and offers that as a starting point, I think that'd be a really good thing. If you can just put into Google or whatever, blind and partially sighted musicians, and then there's a list of collated resources, that would be great. So we're hoping to kind of make this knowledge hub that the community can contribute to. We're going to be very community driven. I don't pretend to know everything about music and sound engineering and blindness and visual impairment. Like, there's so many different things there. But what we can do is offer a platform for the community to contribute that knowledge, and as a whole, make a very useful resource. So I guess this is also a call on everyone here, if you think it is also a good idea to get involved. And again, one point I've got on here is that there are lots of pockets of information around the internet and around people's brains that are amazing, but they're quite scattered, and there's nothing really kind of tying it together and presenting. There might be academic research that's written very academically, which is useful to quite a limited number of people. If we can get a friendly way into all the information and just lay it out in a really useful way, I think that would be good. And again, the online platform that we're proposing is the first step. So it's based on the conversations that I've had and the conversations within the steering group. It's what we feel would be a good thing, but it's not, when we go live with it, it's not the end. We want to be very guided by our users and do what is going to be useful for the community. So as Peter said, there's 3 main areas that we're going to try and support first and foremost based on the research in the group. So the first one is audio production, so access to recording and editing and mixing, things like that. There's music notation as well, how that works for blind and partially sighted people, whether that's reading and composing, or just getting access to music in a format that works for you, whether that might be Braille or modified stave notation. Just being the kind of driving force on making sure that is available readily. And then performance as well, whether that's accessing your instrument, or whether you're part of a group or performing on your own, or maybe it's accessing venues themselves and music culture so that you can perform and get to all the events that you want to. And just to skip through this quite quickly, I think, so access to knowledge, obviously it's a problem at the moment. And I think it can be made more difficult if you're trying to access that knowledge using a screen reader. Trawling through Google search results can take a lot longer, for example. So if we can make this kind of one front door into all of the useful knowledge, then that's good. And on top of that, we want the website to be really user-friendly for sighted people as well, to encourage the use for parents and teachers and anyone really, and also music tech companies, to give them, I guess, to make them want to use it really, and encourage collaboration across the community and between the community and music tech makers. And another area, I think, is the networking and peer support that a platform like this could provide. Again, when I was working, well, I still do work in music, but when I was first in the industry, I didn't know where to go for advice around visual impairment and the music industry. And if we can provide that, if the community can come together and offer that, that would be awesome for anyone that's just starting out, and even anyone that is a seasoned pro and they just want to try a new piece of tech. And I think on that topic as well, somewhere for conversations like the ones we're having today to persist beyond these kind of single events that happen, which are amazing, but often the conversation can die a little bit between. So if we can provide a platform to keep this stuff going, then great. And again, I guess along with the information, the community itself is quite dispersed throughout the world. At this point in time, this might change if it becomes easier to access music. There's not millions and millions and millions of blind and partially sighted musicians. So if we can create a place where everyone can come together, no matter where they are across the world, to collaborate, then great. And I guess on that as well, if someone somewhere has an idea for a solution, but they don't know how to get it out there, if we've got a place that maybe we have representatives from music tech companies keeping a tab on, that idea might get seen more quickly. So community showcasing, I think, is going to be really important to increase that representation, to get those role models represented, and also share the solutions that they've used along the path to get them there. And I think this will be really important for diminishing the discrimination that people cited as being a barrier. I mean, obviously, everyone that is involved is probably a musician first and foremost. I don't want to kind of lean too heavily on the visual impairment side of things, but I think at this point in time, it's good to recognise the massive talent that does exist within our community. So one example here, Olga Koeva. So she is Bulgarian, currently living in Germany. I found her through the steering group. And just two pictures here on the left. So these are both from the same concert. So she's a soprano and a organist and pianist as well. On the left, she's using she's singing and she's using a braille display to sight read music, braille music, which is pretty mind blowing to me. And it's something you just don't see. Like even at music tech events, you don't see that kind of. I don't know, access to notation is never really a thing. It's always how do we access DAWs and stuff like that. And I think there's a whole other world that needs extra representation. And also, we've got a really good team between us, and we want to create more content to fill the gaps where there are gaps. And that might be things like promoting the new research and development that's happening. If we can get music tech companies to promote that directly to their user base, then stuff might happen more quickly, hopefully. So how is it going to be kind of set out? We've got a first prototype at the moment of the website, and that's kind of split into 3 community areas. So one is the Knowledge Hub, kind of like a wiki where anyone that has an account with us can contribute to the Knowledge Hub. There's also a Q&A section, a bit like Stack Exchange or Quora, where someone can come and ask a question and get a quick response from the community on a specific thing. There's also a forum for kind of ongoing discussions for bigger topics, I guess. And beyond that, we're going to have the kind of editorial content, curated content and news to, I guess, keep the whole thing going and give a platform to, I guess, stakeholders and music tech companies, people like that, to promote what they're doing. And there's also going to be kind of a site-wide search to give users like easy access to all of those areas in unison. So where are we at now with the project? So Peter explained we got a little grant from RNIB, which is great, and that's to get the first version of the website online, the public launch, which is going to be hopefully early next year. We're looking at February at the moment. At this point in time, we're kind of reaching out to other organizations and companies and stuff and trying to get their buy-in, basically, and see who can help us promote the thing and who agrees that it would be a good project, because I think it would be a good project. And we're also after testers to help us test and shape the initial launch of the project. So if you feel like you'd like to help with that, then come and have a chat. And just to say that the launch will be just the first step, and that's not the end of it. We're going to be guided by user feedback beyond that point. So a few organisations that we're really, really thankful for their help. RNIB is one. I mean, Peter mentioned that since all of this has happened, I've actually become employed by them at the same time. So I'm one of the music support officers, along with Daisy, who's sat at the front here.
Peter, when Jay finishes up.
there's some synergy there, which is great. So the Technology Association of Visually Impaired People are the kind of official host of the project on the sight loss side of things, which is great. Very thankful for that. And on the kind of arts organisation side of things, we've got Creative United. So thank you, Mary Alice, for sorting us out on that. And the Technology in Music Education UK organisation as well. They've kind of committed to help us get the project used in schools as well and promoted there. So I won't go through everyone because I know we're a bit short on time, but just to give a flavour of our steering group, who we've got involved. So obviously we've got Peter Bosher, who you heard from earlier. We've got the DAISY consortium involved, and I guess probably the most relevant part of what they're doing at the moment is work around Braille music, and how can that all be pulled together and made into a more international project. So very, very appreciative of all their support. Steve Tyler from Leonard Cheshire, James Risdon from ABRSM. Obviously great names, great organisations to have involved. Dave from RNIB, so he's a lot more on the kind of customer experience rather than specifically music, and he has great insights on making venues and things like that accessible. Matthew Horspool as well, from UCAF, he's their Braille expert and kind of specialises in the music area. So yeah, great. And beyond that, we're in touch with several quite esteemed academic researchers and also people from music tech companies, so that's great. And there's just a note there asking anyone here, we would love to hear from anyone who thinks this is a good project and get you involved. So that's a little summary of Sound Without Sight. Any questions from anyone? And do we have time for questions, Alex? I guess is a big question.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, please do fire away. I'll just bring Peter back over to the stage area, and there you go, Peter. Just in front of you there. There's a chair.
Oh, thank you.
Great. Brilliant. Yeah. So, is there any questions at all from anyone here or online? John, yes. Let me grab the microphone. Sorry, 1 second. There we go.
Hi, sounds like an exciting project. I want to urge you, from the point of view of a live sound engineer, to include stuff about live work, because it's great to talk about doors and all that. That's marvelous, but there is a live side to things. I work as a live sound engineer, and I'm currently trying to tackle the idea of how to use a digital desk in a live situation.
I think to reflect the question back at you, John, is would you be interested in joining the community and kind of offering insight onto all those things? Because this is a very malleable project and we want to support as wide an area as possible.
I absolutely would, yeah.
Brilliant.
Absolutely.
Well, in that case, you know,
what have I done?
Heard it here. I mean, it's the community, really. We want input from everyone.
No, it's great.
Does anyone else want to ask a question? Okay, Maya.
My question is if you can tell us more about the music tech people who are in touch with you, like what companies will you contact, or maybe you managed to contact already?
Yeah, so we don't have any official partnerships. I guess that's the official line. So we are in contact with, by hook or by crook, most of the big names that you would have heard of, but we can't announce anything officially at this point in time. Just to say that I think all of the big names that have been mentioned so far today have been involved in some way, and conversations ongoing.
And we can say Daniel Spreadbury, who's here today from Steinberg, who's been very supportive of the group. So thank you, Daniel.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel. Any more?
Is it worth also saying, I mean, Jay has been in touch with Focusrite, with Avid, with other people, so it's it's already, those kind of networking things are already happening. And I'm trying to think of the name. Jason, who is going to be talking later, I think. Jason arranged an industry symposium a while ago, which was a great way that helped us get into some of those networks. So that's already happening.
I guess, yeah, just to also flag, I've just come from the Audio Developer Conference, where obviously loads of key people from key companies. So there have been a lot of conversations had over the last couple of days, but I guess nothing official that I can announce right now. But yeah, thank you.
There seems to be a real kind of buzz around your stand and also Jason's stand. So I think it's a real, there seems to be some momentum, I think, building up in accessibility in the music tech industry, which is really encouraging to see. Guys, so Jay, Peter, thanks so much for sharing your ideas with us and your projects, and we'd love to sort of feed into that from the Bridging the Gap project. So yeah, we have a chat about that as well. But thanks so much. A big round of applause for these guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.